Hello aviators, Sky here, and today we have quite a journey for you. We're not going very far, but there will be plenty of things to witness. The adventure begins at the Vnukovo Airport in Moscow. Let's introduce the airline under discussion today. At first, it seems as though it's a usual small airline with just a few old planes. However, it is equipped with its own terminal, an airport apron, and even its own maintenance service. As you can see, Cosmos is not a usual airline. Its history dates back to the 1940s, when, to service the emerging space industry, a special flight testing squadron was created in Kaliningrad of the Moscow region, today's Korolev. And yes, in a way, Sergei Korolev can be considered as the father of this airline. During the 1950s, the squadron was moved to Vnukovo Airport, which allowed it to grow and be bolstered with new types of aircraft, most of which had unique attributes for special tasks. In the 1990s, Cosmos Airlines starts to take on commercial flights, while still being particularly focused on the flights for the cosmonautics, nuclear and other such industries, in line with the government agencies. The fleet consists of a single Antonov An-12 cargo plane and 3 passenger Tupolev Tu-134 aircraft, one of which will take us on a flight today. After completing all the regular procedures, we arrived at the plane. Of course, no matter if it's a special flight or not, the regulations are implemented with an iron hand. Our transport today is the Tu-134AK, with the tail number RA65726. This plane has seen the world. It recorded its first flight in 1981. It is basically the Tu-134 A3 base model aircraft, however, with a couple of nuances, which were usually added to specialized planes. The first thing that jumps out at you is the elegant and authentic luxury cabin, large leather seats, wooden finish all around, and last but not least, the 220-volt outlets. There are no luggage storage racks, and that actually significantly increases the space within the cabin. After the luxury of first-class cabin, a more familiar area for an average traveler is seen, the economy class. The huge circular portholes look especially cool, which have curtains made of fabric instead of plastic blinds. The seat layout in both cabins are 2+2 in a row, being able to carry 56 to 60 passengers in flight. The capacity difference is due to the company being able to alter seat spaces in the first-class cabin according to the bookings. We didn't wait long at the Vnukovo Airport. After moving around the parking lot for really expensive vehicles, the plane took off. The intriguing part of the journey begins here. The Zhukovsky Airport was the final destination, in flight terms basically a step away. But we were not looking for easy ways, and so the plane flew the other way, right around Moscow. Realistically, we should have been sent away from the congested transport junction. However, the whole flight took us close to the city, and most of the way we flew around MKAD, the Moscow Automobile Ring Road. Not only that, the aircraft flew at the 2-kilometer altitude, with the speed barely reaching 400 kilometers per hour. As you can see, not really crushing speeds. All this under the constant supervision of the air traffic control services in the quite dense traffic of Moscow. An intimidating amount of work went into organizing this voyage. Finally, after nearly doing the full 360 around Moscow, the aircraft neared the Raminske Airfield, on which the Zhukovsky Airport is situated. We didn't land straight away though. The Tu-134 descended towards the runway and then flew along the landing strip, even waving its wings a couple of times before landing softly, while passengers and plane spotters all cheered. Everything was out of the ordinary in this flight, and the runway was no exception. The thing is, the Raminske Airfield is the base of the Gromov Flight Research Institute, the place where most of the planes are tested, and the runway at this airfield spans a whopping 5.5 kilometers in length. If you had to place this airstrip in Manhattan, it would take up the full length of the Central Park, reaching the New York Public Library. You can land anything on it. Upon landing, the plane was welcomed by ground staff and a water arch made by fire engines. Having stepped out of the plane onto tarmac, we were able to examine the aircraft in more detail. The engines, the quite low-hanging wing, and of course the landing gear. A fairly familiar strut in the front, and for our time an unusual main support with powerful hydraulics, as well as 4-wheeled trolleys which are retractable into the fairings behind the wing. Overall, the plane was shiny, clean and looked pristine. Yet, another special modification was evident on the outside of the Tu-134AK. There is a door at the tail end that is equipped with a retractable air stair. It is pretty much a ladder, but this plane is not the Il-86, if you catch my drift. Because the plane is basically a custom version of the Tu-134A3, the crew consists of 4 people, 2 pilots, a flight navigator, and a flight engineer. The cockpit itself is pretty cramped, like in a tiny spaceship, and the abundance of instruments at disposal, in comparison to the minimalist modern plane cockpits, is certainly striking. By the way, it was interesting to see the solution for decreasing the effect of vibration on the panel of flight instruments during landing. It might look a little odd and scary, but in general that is how it's supposed to be. The Tu-134 confirmed why it carries the name Weasel. During the flight inside the cabin, the noise was at the normal level in all flight modes. However, upon stepping outside, it makes sense why it has that nickname. It's not even the engine that makes that noise, it's the auxiliary power unit. Whilst people roamed around the Tu-134, the star of the event was being brought to us. Tu-144, with the tail number 77115, was one of the 2 planes at the airfield. The airliner was built in 1981 and can be considered one of the youngest in the family, out of those which had the chance to fly. This aircraft didn't have a long flying career. In the mid-1980s it was part of the Buran program, eventually becoming a backup to the Tu-144LL in the 1990s. But our hero was never used as a backup in any case, so it only has a few dozen hours of flight time under its belt. I won't touch upon the plane much more since we've already made a video about it, and we were never let inside the plane, but we have a video on that too. However, it has a few differences when comparing it to its Monuno Air Force Museum sibling. The main difference is, obviously, the engines. The 77106 aircraft at the Monuno Museum has the Kuznetsov NK-144 engines. These large turbofan engines with afterburners were a major breakthrough, but the tech level of the time was not up to standard, and these engines turned out to be very inefficient in the long run. The afterburner had to be on throughout the whole flight, which made it noisy and used up a lot of fuel. Later, when the project was reworked, a modified Tu-144D was made, with the more conservative but better fitted classic turbojet engines, RD-36-51A, which were capable of maintaining supersonic flight without the need for afterburners. Physically, both of the engines can be easily differentiated from each other by the nozzle shape. Another interesting difference can be seen in the slightly altered wing. On the early models of the Tu-144 planes, one being the Monuno Museum aircraft, ailerons are placed along the entire length of the trailing edge of the wing. On the later models of the Tu-144D, they were slightly shortened, leaving the wing with small stationary wingtips. The other cool features of this supersonic giant, a droop nose, a canard, and a hefty chassis, are all in their place. It would be interesting to look at the faces of the passengers sitting in the planes on the tarmac when they saw the Tu-144 just calmly passing by amidst the usual routine of the airport. Being one of the more recent units, the plane presented today is extremely well equipped. It also had the luck not to be touched by vandals and thieves, unlike many of the other Tu-144 planes. It has even been said that this plane could fly, however it would probably be costly and extremely difficult, so the chances of us seeing this aircraft in the air are slim to none. Even this is an extraordinary sight. A Tu-144 is parked on tarmac of a functioning public airport, right next to the recently landed Tu-134 plane. The last time anyone could witness this was over 40 years ago, in 1978, when the use of these supersonic planes was discontinued. Once both machines were checked and the supersonic giant was sent to its resting place, we got ready to go back to the nearby airport. Of course, it all had to be done in accordance to the rules, such as document checks, registration, and the security check, the usual routine. Zhukovsky Airport actually turned out to be a very calm and cozy place, and the people checking the flight details on the display system were surprised by seeing a flight from Zhukovsky to Vnukovo Airport. The flight back was more relaxed, and the horde of crazed aviators were no longer running across the cabin, constantly shifting the center of mass. The Tu-134 quickly got airborne and flew back. Touching up on the age of this plane. Many believe that old planes are worn out and dangerous, and a lot of times when there is news of a plane crash, someone will throw in a phrase like, well, this plane was 10 to 15 years old. Considering this phrase, all the people on board of this nearly 40-year-old Tu-134 should have been clenching onto their seats in anxiety. But how come we didn't see a single worried face? Some may even say that we are just a crazy bunch for paying a huge amount of money for a flight when we could have easily driven there in less than 2 hours. Well, that may be true, but there is also another explanation. The phrase, the plane is this many years old, is exaggerated. Just don't get me wrong, of course planes are not eternal. Metals do degrade and even modernization has its limits. But all these parameters are considered during the construction of the airliner, and its lifespan resource is calculated in decades and tens of thousands of flight hours. The lifespan of a plane pretty much depends on the quality of technical support and maintenance it receives. Any issues are fixed during inspections, while many elements and systems, including the engines, can be simply replaced if needed. To sum it all up, it all depends on the operating company. A conscientious operator can safely take you across the lands on an old plane, in this instance a nearly 40-year-old Tu-134. And if the operator isn't too focused on good maintenance, well, then even a new Dreamliner can be turned into a broken piece of garbage. All in all, be sure to check who is behind the wheel, so to speak. And finally, we have arrived from the faraway Moscow into Moscow. This experience has been undeniably special, and soon might become completely unrepeatable. A fully functioning Tu-134 is a rarity nowadays, and soon it may have to retire completely. On this, our awesome journey comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments below, like and subscribe to the channel. Fast flights and soft landings to you.